In hockey, there's been a long-running debate over whether or not the color of a goalie's pads can actually give an advantage to either the goalie or the shooter, depending on their color. The margins for potential difference are already small, so this is in reference to almost exclusively high-level hockey. Amateur goalies, along with people shooting on them, simply aren't good enough for any relevant data. So let's look at the NHL, where there's of course been all sorts of different-looking pads, but where, for some time now, most of the more flashy pads are unfortunately relics of the past. The team-matching colors and patterns have been essentially replaced with shades. With the amount of razor-thin goal reviews, you might think, why doesn't every goalie wear black pads? Especially since close calls on goal line reviews are more common than ever, and since the league refuses to implement reliable puck or line tracking. Did it cross the line? Did it not? What do you think? Is what the NHL goes on in 2024, relying on some of the crispiest 360p footage you've ever seen to make high-stakes calls. So why not make it immensely harder for the people who are already watching blurry footage to tell if the puck has completely crossed your goal line until the league does something about it?
It's a goal! It's a goal! It's a goal! So they must have seen it where we couldn't see it on the padding and then across the line.
In addition, some goalies have said that they've simply gotten early whistles because refs have a harder time distinguishing puck from pad in live action.
Or like the refs might lose it and might get a quick whistle, so.
Great break for the Ducks. You see, Jonas Hill has never frozen the puck.
Only the vast majority of goalies in the league for some time now wear primarily one color on their pads, and it's not black. It's the polar opposite.
I think the big question, I can't believe I've saved it for this long, is what's up with the white pads?
I don't know, I just had a lot
It's like your trademark.
Yeah, I know, but just had a lot of time to think about the thing. And,
I have a certain design that I like all my pads to kind of go over. I like more white than color.
Okay. So why white? And why wouldn't you want black or a dark color?
You know, everybody has their opinion about black pads, but
well, in theory, there are a few typical answers. Some people claim darker pads make you look smaller than white pads and potentially make it easier to see gaps by clearly defining your edges. Also, apparently some goalies have issues tracking the puck when it's close to their body if they're wearing black or dark colors.
some people say they lose the puck in the black gear, so they're slower to react on a rebound.
I specifically remember fans claim they noticed this with Ilya Bryzgalov back in the day.
That's a hockey, you know, it's only a game. Why you have to be mad?
It's also a relatively popular opinion that white actually makes you look significantly bigger, with the idea that the shooter thinks there's less net to shoot at, and that it potentially makes the mesh, the ice, or the boards blend in with your pads to mess with the shooter's vision, by potentially making it more difficult to clarify as easily where your pads begin and end, making it harder to see gaps. And these days, there is indeed a dwindling pool of NHL goalies who wear color at all. But if there was a definitive consensus that all the "it makes you bigger, it makes the gaps harder to see" was factual and practical in a game, wouldn't every team in the league mandate white pads? Because no one's doing that. Or are they? All of this deliberate white pad trickery business apparently started with Patrick Waugh. Waugh started in these old crusty things, then basically slapped some blue and red on them and people loved them. Only shortly after, he donned a new pad. It's been well documented that these pads were not designed the way they were by accident, but that they were darker colored along the edges, red in Montreal, black in Colorado, the dark edges to potentially muck up anything debatable on the goal line, but more notably, surrounded a white triangle in the middle. And that white triangle was allegedly there to potentially bait shooters into thinking there was more space in the 5-hole area than there was, or blur the line between pad and 5-hole to make them a little unsure of the gap. And any shots by those tempted would theoretically often end up being easy saves for Waugh, who was not only known for his incredible butterfly style, but ability to get to it quickly. That was the theory, and with success comes imitation, so there's many random stripes of color to this day that may vaguely resemble some sort of triangle seen on Patrick Waugh's pads. But the majority of the pad being white pretty much exploded in the early 2000s, with white pad conversation coming to a peak in the hockey world in around 2008, as Marc-Andre Fleury would essentially put the nail in the colored pad coffin. Fleury, who always wore his iconic yellow pads and had success, had a conversation with an optometrist who reminded him that yellow is the easiest color for the human eye to pick out.
yeah, yellow was the color that picked the quickest with your eyes.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, so I just moved out to the white ones.
And said that she'd been shocked by his choice for years. So he switched his classic yellow pads to white. And not only did Fleury's stats improve,
his coach says this is the best he's ever seen Marc-Andre Fleury play. His save percentage is .956.
something Ottawa ironically saw firsthand. But the Penguins made it to the finals, where they lost to Detroit and Chris Osgood's white pads. However, a year after making those finals, Marc-Andre Fleury would be back, and this time he would win the cup in his white pads. People made a big deal of it at the time too. Again, like we mentioned with Patrick Roy, teams and goalies have long copied what gave others success in this league, hence why a top goalie like Fleury getting even better didn't go unnoticed. Though there was certainly some healthy debate, even at the time, over whether the improvement could be credited to Fleury's play or his pad change. However, Fleury himself said at the time that his Penguins teammates claimed the white did indeed make him look bigger.
Players on the team said, makes me look a little bigger, so I thought, can give me a little advantage, I'll take it.
And so, not only was that it for Fleury in yellow, but that began a massive shift towards the idea that white did indeed give you an advantage. And now almost every goalie in the league wears primarily white pads. And years later, we're ironically talking about the Penguins again. Only this time because they've mandated white pads and not just done a little experiment. So why, if there's such a strong opinion on one side, can you find UC Saros consistently decked out in almost the same bright yellow to this day? And not only were people very high on Saros his entire career until relatively recently, but the Predators are clearly fine with it. And I guess things aren't as black and white or yellow here as they seem, as obviously not only are there people who don't see white as an advantage, but they also don't see bright colors as a disadvantage. Another for instance, not only is Marc-Andre Fleury now second in all-time wins for a goaltender in NHL history and one of the best goalies of all time, but clearly whatever the white offered him wasn't something he viewed as a necessity, as along with white, he's used all kinds of colors for large amounts of games over many years after all the white pad business started, even occasionally donning the bright yellow again. And so, as one of the few goalies in the league still wearing all kinds of colors, it was really nice to see Marc-Andre Fleury pass Patrick Roy on the all-time wins list wearing some white, playing against the plainest white pads in the league in Ilya Sorokin. But again, he's worn colors, people still wear colors, and as far as I know, only the Penguins have mandated white. So is the success of the white pad illusion an illusion itself? I mean, if there was actual logic in white pads, shouldn't everyone be angry at their team or fired from their team for not also implementing this rule like Pittsburgh? Occasionally, if you're watching on a screen, some of those colored pads really do look small. Definitely not all, but some. Sometimes I feel like they may look heavier when obviously they aren't, but it could cause you to perceive movement as, say, not as swift or fast as an all-white getup. Similar to when players like Paul Kariya, Jaromir Jagr, and Wayne Gretzky wore dark skate holders. It can make their feet look heavy and clunky despite them being great skaters, and it possibly alter the perception of exactly how fast some of them were, just because it stands out more against the bright background, and so the darker something is, the more it makes it look like you're carrying some extra gear that's weighing your feet down. So just as a player's feet look a little lighter and bouncy with white skate holders than black, because you're subconscious and that alone can tell you that it took them longer to drop, a goalie with especially dark pads can often look like they're dropping slower or with some additional force compared to a goalie with white or light pads, where the white can just look faster. And most goalies these days aren't pulling an Artur Survey and having your pads painted a new color with the amount of pucks you've saved, so it's harder to notice imperfections on white pads from further away than ever. At home, on your TV, or when you're watching a screen, they look really white because you get a certain amount of white level blending on the screen, but you get much more of that blurred effect at home than if you're actually there. Where if you're watching a goalie who's wearing lots of color from home, their movements look more distinguished even if they're not doing anything too crazy. It's just the contrast against the sort of bird's eye view of the ice surface. I feel like the black and white pad discussion is also sort of similar to that of black and white stick tape. White can make your stick handling look a little quicker with all the changes in color as your tape waves over the puck, where black may not look as fast but could look more heavy, solid, or hard on it, when in reality they're very similar. And like tape, I've also heard completely conflicting experiences from goalies and players.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people say you look smaller in black pads.
I thought you looked bigger.
Oh, wow. Well, there you go. See, that's what I mean. Everybody seems to have something different to say.
However, we can't deny actions speak loudest. Most goalies are wearing white, and there have been NHL players who have said that white can sometimes make goalies seem bigger. But according to others, those vague differences are clearly so subtle or non-existent that they can be hardly factually classified as differences, other than that they are simply different colored surfaces. Anton Hudobin's pads even got sort of close to those mesh pattern ones, and that sort of thing never really caught on, nor did we hear from anyone that it gave him any sort of advantage. And so, since the waters are so muddy and the margins are so thin, is there a reason we should look at banning or restricting white again? Last time the ban was discussed, the goalies were strongly opposed, and I get it. When your job is on the line, it's not a fashion show, it's about results. So why would we even begin to consider banning them? Is there any evidence of an actual problem here? Well, the worry here is that there won't be goalies in the future to wear pads at all if no one is inspired to play. Obviously, white pads are the best option for kids or adults who often switch teams and are on a budget, and they at least want to sort of match the colors of the team they're going to be playing for, but most kids and most people in general don't want to stop there. Most people like colors better than shades, especially in sports, and would rather match the team while showing their personality than not. They don't usually want all white. It's obviously more pleasing to the eye for anyone to look at a painting than a blank canvas. Things like pad skins have been relatively popular for some time now, which is much more cost effective than getting a brand new set sheerly to switch the color if they're going to be switching teams often. So for a kid, customizable white pads make some sense. But stores didn't used to be filled with pretty much only white pads. All this white pads for kids business came from whatever's popular in the competitive realm, and plain, bland white is simply less intriguing, less fun. Pads that made you want to put them on just by looking at them always helped address what's known as the goalie crisis minor hockey has faced for just about ever. It's always been tough to get kids to sign up for goalie, and nowadays it's tougher than ever. Again, the league has actually previously discussed banning white pads, only it was to increase goal scoring, something they didn't do because there was no tangible evidence of its benefit. Former NHL goalie Jocelyn Thibault said white should not be banned without harsh statistical evidence, though he recommends white pads to kids. The league also discussed changing the color of the mesh from white to yellow to make it easier for shooters to see, to which goalies said they would simply match the mesh. Fun. In the past couple of years, scoring in the NHL is way up, along with white pad use, so there's not much logic in, say, banning white pads because they give too much of an advantage. But that disparity is usually pinned on players just becoming too good. And while we can't definitively prove it one way or the other, as it's still opinion-based and there's still some completely conflicting stuff out there, we can look at some really recent stats to help distinguish whether or not white pads are actually a necessity for a top goalie in this league. If you don't know Adin Hill, he plays for the Vegas Golden Knights. Hill is here to offer colored goalie pads a lifeline. Ever since the league became really obsessed with white, guess what the Cup finals have looked like for goalie pads ever since Fleury and Osgood won theirs in pretty much solid white. Every single goalie who has played in the game where the Stanley Cup is awarded has worn white pads, with the exception of Michael Layton and Carey Price, who have only worn mostly white pads. And it doesn't bode well that they both lost. And not until 2023 did Adin Hill win in his gold pads over Sergei Bobrovsky in his half-white pads. Fast forward to now, and Hill currently leads the league in save percentage. So I ask you, in his games at the start of the 2023-24 season, where he built up these league-leading stats, what color were his pads? That's right, white. For the away games, which he did last year as well. For the home games, Hill's still wearing his gold. He played almost exactly half his games in each and only lost 2 games in each. In white or on the road, Hill went 4-1-1. He allowed 13 goals, facing 165 shots, that's 27.5 a game, with a 2.26 goals against average and a 9.21 save percentage. Pretty damn good. And in gold or at home, Vegas played 2 additional games and Hill went 6-1-1. They only allowed 1 more goal. Hill faced 241 shots, that's 30.1 a game, with a 1.7 goals against average and a 940 save percentage over the course. Even better. Sure, it's a small sample size, but it's also an interesting look at how the defending Stanley Cup champions currently do not think pad color matters, but rather that the person wearing them does. Remember, white caught on pretty much league-wide because of winning in previous years, so most top goalies wear white. You know who else wears white? Most of the goalies who have had awful seasons. And so, since teams and goalie coaches have indeed long copied what gave others success in this league, and solid gold works well for Adin Hill, it looks like goalies should be safe to get creative again. And that's great because color really does help get people interested in hockey. Goalie stats are already plummeting because the league is so advanced.
All these releases, like, you can't even read them anymore. It's just like rep or rest and freaking goals, you know?
So it doesn't really matter. The league could even offer a slight pad size increase again if they truly felt it necessary for goalies to be given an advantage. Regardless of what the league does or doesn't do, we simply have to adjust our definitions of good goalie stats. The game evolves and stats go through peaks and valleys. And there's obviously tons of potential reasons why the amount of kids who want to play goalie and those who continue to play it past their youth is declining. From the cost of equipment, registration, and transportation to the fact that most youth hockey practices aren't based around goalies at all.
Nice drill, coach. Really very cute. But when are you gonna work with me in goal?
To the amount of people who want to get pelted by high-speed pucks for fun. Whatever it is, you get it. But one thing that always got kids interested and dedicated to playing goalie was personality and flash.
At the end of the day, I think they just look pretty cool.
Most people, especially kids, obviously don't know these people. They don't hear them talk. All they see is their game and what they're using. I'm sure there's plenty of fans who became Marc-Andre Fleury fans or fans of the teams he's played for or hockey fans in general because of the pads Fleury wore.
Do you still have the yellow ones just in case?
Yeah, just in case. I'm not sure yet what I'm going to do, so I brought them under for me.
Like a great jersey, great-looking pads are genuinely good for the game. And again, also like jerseys, some people specifically become fans of a great look, and you pretty much incinerate those chances when they're just bland. I miss goalies that had signature patterns or that experimented with some new stuff every now and then. It let the fans see a bit of personality from the person who gets the most ice time. Just imagine if every goalie's pads had their own crazy designs like Aaron Dell's. I think it's pretty much universally understood that kids like colors better than shades.
I want to get a picture so I can show my kids that there's actually someone wearing something similar to what I wore when I played.
And I'll end with this. I have this vivid memory burned in my mind from when I was like 7. It's the middle of winter in Canada, and whilst I'm walking inside after a snowy recess, I look over and see a kid sitting in a 6-inch deep puddle of slush with bright red snow pants on, making rapid butterfly safe movements with his legs, yelling, "Patrick Roy!" And that kid was Marc-Andre Fleury. No, can you imagine? No, as far as I know, that kid never went pro, but that day he dreamt it, and that's what's important here. He was inspired enough to ask for bright red snow pants, and regardless of the strange looks he garnered, sat alone in a puddle and splashed water around by kicking his legs out to the side, yelling Patrick Roy. That's what we need more of, and something tells me white snow pants wouldn't have quite captured the magic. For all we know, without a Patrick Roy of his own, actual Marc-Andre Fleury may not have been splashing around saving imaginary pucks in his snow pants.
With our first pick this year, we'd like to select from the Cape Breton Screaming Eagles, goaltender Marc-Andre Fleury.
So, if there is any incentive or logic behind banning or restricting the use of white, I think growing the game for the youth would be it. Therefore, for the greater good of hockey, should the NHL reopen the case for banning or restricting the amount of white allowed on pads? Let me know your opinion on all this in the comments, and also, what are the best, worst, and weirdest goalie pads you've ever seen in any league or tournament?
Hitting the arena ice, Marc-Andre Fleury, who will make his NHL debut.